Good evening, friends. It is week 9 in football, and we have had a very, very eventful mid-season leading up to this point, Dan. I think the playoffs are getting a little bit more clear, but there is definitely still some muddle in the middle, and now you find yourself in the muddle. How are you doing tonight?
Oh, my team sucks. This season's over. I don't know why we're still
Whoa.
doing the show.
I think you made that exact same joke last year when you felt like your team was eliminated. I won't go that far, but I do find it interesting. I was looking at this today when I was deciding my playoff teams. I find it interesting that some of the teams that are in contention for the playoff spots are just like, I'm selling. I don't want to do this. And I'm just like, good Lord. I guess everybody's just fighting for the first draft pick now. So, which is actually going to come up in the show today. There's a couple of things that I feel like I need to remind people about when it comes to the draft lottery. Good evening, Nate. How are you? We will get you in eventually, though. I have to say, prospects not looking good. The person I thought was leaving is certainly not leaving now. That doesn't mean someone won't leave.
Oh, I think there's still a chance.
But I don't think they are. But we're going to get you in. You have the next spot. I just don't know when the next spot will be. Funnily enough, talked to Brian a little bit this week, and he said if I knew the 49ers were going to fall apart like this, I never would have quit the fantasy league. So he's already having his regrets, but that doesn't matter. All right, Dan, let's talk some trades. Some interesting trades went down because of injuries that happened in week 8. Week 8 was a big injury week. The first trade, rather insignificant. Taylor gives up a 7 for the Browns defense. I found this one interesting. JR acquires Kyler Murray, giving up Jameson Williams, who I don't want to say he was a corner piece of the trade he made, but I think JR expected more from him in the trade he made a little while back, but JR did still get a lot of good pieces from there. But then right after
more from him too. I think the Lions expected more from him too.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair point. But then right after that, JR acquires Derek Carr and Mark Andrews from Stevie, who looks like he is taking himself out of playoff contentions at this point. Stevie gets a first back in that trade for giving up Derek Carr and Mark Andrews. And then Dalton Schultz goes for a fifth, basically. Horvath acquiring Dalton Schultz after cutting Cole Kmet after this show. The influence of this show on some of the roster moves in this league is hilarious. Cuts Cole Kmet, you pick Cole Kmet up. Horvath decides he needs a tight end, goes and gets Dalton Schultz. Do any of those trades stand out to you? The most interesting, obviously, being JR, who gave up Schultz because he got Andrews and starts to solidify a playoff roster by adding Mark Andrews.
Yeah, I think he helped his team there. I think he's still short a quarterback. Derek Carr's not the answer. Derek Carr's not an answer in the NFL.
I like Carr this week. I think it was a good move for him for this week.
I mean, yeah, everybody looks good when they play the Bears.
Exactly. And I think that's what JR is going for there. So, yeah, that's kind of my takeaway there. If Mark Andrews can keep playing to the level he's been playing, and I see no reason to say he can't, but if he can, JR firms up a spot that not everybody else in the league has firm. And so, I mean, I don't hate the move for him. He gets out of the streaming game and having to depend on Dalton Schultz every week. Taylor goes out and get the Browns defense, where the Browns defense is kind of a conundrum because there are weeks where they look really good in football and not great in fantasy. But then there are weeks where they look really bad against the Colts and they still had a pretty decent fantasy game. So weird one there, but Taylor acquiring a Cleveland Brown is not a surprise by any stretch of the imagination.
Not at all.
No. Reminder to all, trade deadline is next week. So if you still plan on dealing, for the new people who aren't in the league, it will allow you to make trades all the way up until the very last second of the Monday night matchup in week 10. We have a very early trade deadline in this week. It was one of the anti-tanking rules. Since there's no reason to tank, we can look at pushing that trade deadline back next year. But for this year, I'm not changing anything mid-season because I don't do that. So trade deadline is week 10, and it will literally let you make a trade until the second they call that Monday night game over. Dan, I think you pulled off a trade at like halftime of the Monday night game last year. So.
It was actually with you.
Yeah, I was going to say, it was sitting in your queue and you were waiting to accept it. That's right. So
I wanted to see how the game played out. And I waited. I think it was like the fourth quarter when I accepted it. So I was debating whether to send you a counter or not. And I was like, I don't.
And then you knew I'd be asleep.
So. I was like, I better just accept this because he's not gonna do anything with this counter.
There we go.
That's how I got 3 of my first round picks this year.
That's right. That was that trade. All right, guys, let's take a look at the standings. No major changes from last year. I don't know how well that shows up for you guys, but that's how it's going to look up on the screen. Darren goes to 8-0. JR stays at 6 stays at 6, but 6-2. I move up to third place, 5-3, tied with Horvath at 5-3. And then the last two playoff spots are currently a 4-way tie with Dan, who says his team sucks. Phil, who Dan says team sucks. Terry, who Dan picked as his preseason champion, and my brother Taylor. So 4-4 there, with, what is that? 6 teams bringing up the back end. Stevie, Greg, Rob P, Rob Motts, Kenny, and still at the back, Eric, though he pulled off a win last week. So
what a great week to have his best week of the season.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll talk more about the playoff picture in general later on, Dan. But what I found interesting when I was looking at these playoff teams, I wasn't even considering the 4-4s. But Stevie at 3-5, 1 game out of the playoffs, doesn't seem like he's into it. Greg, I'm starting to get worried about. We're going to talk about that in a second. Rob P, I think, is still fighting. And then Rob Motts, I don't get a big fight vibe from Rob Motts. Greg, I don't know if you realize it, started Deebo Samuel on an out week. That's a loss of a lottery point. And so far this week has not filled any of his bye week teams. So I'm getting a little worried about Greg. I haven't paid much attention to his transactions, but hopefully you're still invested in this thing, buddy, because you're still in the playoff race. So yeah, pretty interesting stuff when you look at those. Any takeaways, I guess, from last week in the current standings there, Dan, before we get into it?
A lot of what we expected to happen. I thought, how do we do in our weekly predictions?
You went 3-4. I went 4-3. Obviously we were in lockstep, but the one that we were against each other, I was right, you were wrong. So.
Yeah, that would have been. Doesn't matter. I think JR solidified himself. We were both questioning him last week. I think getting himself up to 6 wins this early, he just needs 2 more, and he's in the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree.
I think 8 wins get you in. So I think he put himself back. I don't think he'll be a quick exit from the playoffs, but
yeah, I was gonna say I think he's pretty well in the playoffs at this point, unless he loses out, which I don't see happening with the current state of the league. So I think JR is in. Obviously, Darren's in. Darren might end up with an actual clinched playoff spot after another win. But Darren does have a relatively not great bye week this week, and then I play him next week, and I know we both have a shitty bye week next week. So mainly because the Miami Dolphins comprise his team and the Kansas City Chiefs comprise my team, and they're both playing their London game and taking their bye after said London game. So, Dan, I'm actually going to take this back off the screen because we're going to start off not talking about the league. You and I had a great idea last week after talking about our disappointing teams and our surprise teams. Let's take it to the player route. And let's talk about disappointing players and surprise players. And we have each picked 3. I want you to announce them as your 2 runners up, and then you can talk about, and do you want to start with the good or the bad?
Let's start with the bad and then with the good. These are just guys that I think have really changed, who I think have really had a huge impact on this season. So my 3 bad guys, I think.
Announce them as your 2 runners up, and then who is your biggest disappointment?
2 runners up, DK Metcalf. I think that he had much higher expectations coming into this season. He's really kind of let everyone down. And Bijan Robinson.
Ooh.
I feel like he's not lived up to expectations. I think we all expected more. It was really tied between him and Gibbs for me, but I went with him because
I had him as my RB2 behind Christian McCaffrey in my preseason rankings. And I think it's fair to say, even though he's probably the RB5, RB6, RB7, somewhere in there, it's not to the level that I would have expected putting him behind Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, he's actually all the way down at 12.
He is 12, yeah.
So I just only went 1 touchdown at this point. I had higher expectations for him, so I think he's been a disappointment. Again, he was the number 1 pick in our league. And then the biggest to me is Devontae Adams.
Okay.
He's my champion of the losers.
Yeah, it's been a weird season with Jacoby Myers sort of usurping him there. So my question to you is, for a while there, he was being shopped in the league and then eventually was bought by Stevie's team, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Is he a buy candidate again? Do you see him bouncing back? He's averaging almost 10 targets a game, but just on a team that isn't playing very well.
The coaching staff change there could make him valuable again, but I think the asking price from the owner of that player is way too high for a guy who is had one catch the past 2 weeks each week.
Yeah, it's been rough.
I know Stevie wants a 1 for him, and I just could not fathom giving up a 1 for that unless you just don't know that you're going to get anything better than what he's been.
Hilariously,
the situation's not going to get better there.
Yeah, hilariously, I went in and put together a trade package for Stevie. I don't have a 1, so there was no 1 involved, but Devontae Adams was involved. And even me, who has hated my wide receiving situation all season long, after letting the offer sit there for a half an hour, went in and deleted the offer because I'm like, no, like I'm not going to pay for Devontae Adams, even in the shit show that is my receiving situation. So I think you make a really good point there that the change there could be positive, but we don't know if it will. But Stevie's asking price is just too much, and I wasn't even willing to give him his asking price, so he was probably never going to accept that offer from me. So.
You're probably right. I doubt he was going to accept it without the 1 because just based on what he said.
Yeah.
And I just think that there's no way, because even if he goes out and let's say he goes out and has 8 catches, 75 yards and a touchdown, do you feel comfortable if you had a 1 giving it up for him at this point?
No, not
based
even
off
a little
1
bit.
week. I mean, neither would I, and we have the trade deadline next week, so there's no way he's going to get that value, in my opinion, for him.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. Like I said, I'm more intrigued by your Bijan Robinson take because I have him in quite a few leagues. I had him very highly ranked, and up until the flu game, I'm calling it the flu game, the headache game, whatever the fuck was wrong with him. Up until that game, I wasn't that disappointed with him, but lately, yeah, I'm not feeling real great about my picks there. So. For me, all of my guys were affected by injury, but it's not just injury. What I've seen from them on the field when they have been healthy has not been good. And honestly, I wasn't sure which one I wanted to call my biggest disappointment, but after listening to yours, I have some solid decision making here. So number 1, I'm going to go with Miles Sanders. And I went through, Dan, and looked at where I had these guys ranked in my preseason rankings versus where they're ranked right now. So I had Sanders as my RB 14. He is currently the RB 54. He's only had 1 decent game this season, and then now he is losing his job to Chuba Hubbard. I've never been a big Chuba Hubbard guy, and now he's losing his job to him. Number 2 for me is Aaron Jones, who I know you're feeling the burn on that one as well. He was my RB 18 coming into the season. He's RB 44 now. He's only played in 4 games, but he's still only averaging 9 points per game, and it's all been carried by one very good game back in like week 1 where he scored 22 points. And then my biggest disappointment by far, because I bought so hard into this guy and his small sample size, same team, Christian Watson. Christian Watson was my wide receiver fucking 16 because I remember that 4-game stretch last year and I thought he and Jordan Love were going to hit it off. And again, I know these guys have all been injured. Christian Watson, because of the strength at wide receiver right now, Dan, is the wide receiver 83 in our league. He has appeared in 4 games. He has only scored above 10 fantasy points 1 time in those 4 games. And that was back in week 1. Or I apologize. This is in regular PPR. So in our league, it wasn't even week 1. It was week 2 where he had 3 catches for 91 yards, I think was his only time above 10. Other than that, he's caught 2 or 3 passes in every game. He's had no big yardage games. He had the touchdown back, and I'm saying week 1, it was week 4. That was just his first game of the season. So like the people who had him probably didn't even benefit from him because they dropped him because they needed the roster spot. So I think my biggest disappointment this season is Christian Watson and probably just the Green Bay passing game in general. Again, something I know you can fully agree with.
I mean, you could just call the Green Bay Packers a disappointment in general.
That's right. Here's the thing. Interestingly enough, I saw a lot of people highly rating their defense coming into the season, but I knew they had lost so much. I actually wasn't all in on their defense, but I just really had it in my head. And I blame one of my co-hosts over at Club Fantasy, Joel Worth. I think Joel led me astray here. He's a big Packers guy. He put that poison in my ear, and I bought way too far into it. So
I really like how we went at this whole like bottom 3 guys completely different. You looked at guys in actual rankings where I looked at like, so for me, Miles Sanders, I looked at him as not top, and at the beginning of the season, if you ask me the realm of possibility, I'm not shocked he's RB 55. That doesn't surprise me. I thought it was a possibility. You came to me before season said that Devontae Adams is going to have back-to-back 1-catch games. That was not within the realm of possibility for me.
That's fair. So it's funny. I used to make this joke all the time. expectations are a you problem. So where you went at it very analytically, I went at it as my expectations, and these are clearly a me problem because I had these guys way too high. And then I think it's going to carry over. I'm going to be interested to hear who your surprises are. I'll go first here. None of these are going to be a surprise. Two of them play for the same damn team. Raheem Mostert, just to continue what he's doing at 31 years old, I believe he is, and I think it's 31, about to be 32. He is the RB2 on the season. I had him coming into the season ranked as my RB 37, and I just want to take a second and pull his stats up here just so I can remind myself, because obviously the touchdowns have been great, but this man has 100 carries, 97 carries, 520 yards, 5.4 yards per carry, still involved in the passing game with 23 catches, and then, of course, 10 touchdowns. And I think that's just been enormous and certainly not what I expected from a 31-year-old running back. And then DeAndre Swift, to go in and see him be the bell cow in the carry portion of it, I had him ranked, and I liked DeAndre Swift. I had him ranked as my RB 29. He's up at RB 6 right now. Obviously, back-to-back home runs for Darren on DeAndre Swift and Raheem Mostert. But to see the carry part of it, he had 99 carries last season. He's at 117 already, and he's doing what he's doing with a lack of touchdowns. He only has 4 total touchdowns right now, but he's still involved in the passing game. But like I said, by far carrying the ball more than anybody else there, 4.9 yards per carry. But Dan, there could only be one person who is my biggest surprise, and it's hilarious because I believed in him as much, if not more, than anybody else, and that is Puka fucking Nacua. To come in and do what he did, to establish himself as the second wide receiver and, putting it bluntly, the second Cooper Kupp in that offense, because they use their wide receivers very differently. High volume. He's at 90 targets through 8 games, 61 catches, almost 8 catches per game in the first 8 games of his career. Only 2 touchdowns, which is surprising and not surprising. He's the wide receiver 7 on the season in our league. And Dan, I went back to look because I knew I liked Puka Nacua. And I was like, I went and looked at the Fantasy Pros. You can see where people ranked them. And I was not the highest, surprisingly. People had him in the 40s right before the season started. I had him at 86. So even though I was singing his praises, I was not bought in nearly enough on your guy, Puka Nacua, all told, because I fucking cut him when I needed to make my final roster cut down to get legal at the beginning of the season and just missed out. So
sorry, buddy. I feel for you.
You don't. And then when you put him on the trade, I was like, I don't know if I should offer anything because I feel like he's just fucking with me at this point. So.
No, he's on the trade market. If someone is willing to pay for
wide receiver 7 prices,
then we can have a serious talk. Actually, I was going to send you an offer, but there's nothing on your team that you'd be willing to trade that I would want.
Yep. My team is very, very thin, and I need my starters. That's why I've not made a ton of trades at this point. Like, you don't want my 2. And that's about what I have that's willing to give. And I'll be honest, I'm not even all that willing to give it. I'm in a rough situation. I don't think I'm going to be able to improve my team heading in. So, Dan, who are your 3 biggest surprises of this?
All right. So, biggest surprises. No, this guy's a good football player. I thought he would do well. I didn't think he would control this much of the backfield as he has going into the situation that he was in. But Montgomery, I think. Going into Detroit with them drafting Gibbs, I did not expect him to put up the numbers he's put up and be as important to their offense as he is. I also had Swift as my number 2. I did not expect him to blow up the way he has once they went to Philadelphia, considering how much Philadelphia did not really – they used more of the, multiple running back situations, them paying Penny as much as they did just to not play him.
Yeah.
Was kind of surprising. But then I also had Puka as my number 1.
Okay.
We were on the same page there. When I first started this, I was also kind of looking at it as like the 3 most important guys in the league. And I knew I was going to change after I did this because CMC is just, he has been the guy. Like, he is the one guy that's just carried your team. Where would you be without him? Kind of situation.
0-7 or 1-7
in there as well. And I also had Diggs when I started doing that because I think he was really carried. And just really.
Oh, I see what you're. Okay, I didn't know what you meant by important, but you mean important to a manager in the league. Now I understand completely.
But I did it both ways, just because I wasn't sure if I was like looking at it the same way you were looking at it. So
no, you weren't at all. The way you were looking at it is more like the league MVP that we talked about last week.
Yeah.
And we'll probably do that again at the end of the season. All right, before we get into the matchup, Stan, Lee, who asked us our first question ever, probably asking us a question for the first time in a long time. Cup or Pacheco? Now, is Stafford confirmed out? I think I missed that at some point.
I must have missed that too. I did not see that he was confirmed out. I thought it was game time.
Well, let's go on the assumption that Stafford is out. Is that enough for you to start Isaiah Pacheco over Cooper Kupp in a full PPR scoring format?
No, I would take Kupp still. He is listed as questionable. He's not. They're not sure if he's going to play tomorrow or not. But
yeah, I was going to say it's a UCL sprain, I think is what they called it, and it's all going to. They call it a game time decision. It's going to be how he can grip the ball before the game starts tomorrow. So,
even with Stafford out, I would take Kupp. You just don't know what you're going to get from the Chiefs running back situation. It could be a high scoring game tomorrow in Germany with the Dolphins.
Yeah,
and if they're just trying to go back and forth, Mahomes isn't going to be running the ball a lot. There's going to be a lot of throw in there. So
I'm with you on this one. I actually had to look into a couple of things this week for young quarterbacks for an article I was working on. And Brett Rippon, interestingly enough, is a career 60% passer and has a QB rating and a touchdown to interception and all that. Basically, he is matching his career as to what Baker Mayfield is doing this season. And nobody's worried about Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. So why worry about Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua? And then more importantly, when new quarterbacks come in, they tend to overthrow their first read, which is going to be great for Cooper Kupp. We're talking 15 to 20 targets, I feel like, if Brett Rippon is the starter. There's a world where Cooper Kupp in full PPR is more valuable with Brett Rippon than he is with Matt Stafford just because of all the looks. I think if it's Rippon, it maybe hurts Puka a little bit, far more than it hurts Kupp, because I think it's going to be a first read situation.
Yeah,
just my opinion.
What their game plan is.
Yep. And actually, I was going to ask you more about Puka when we got to your team, because I feel like there might be a lineup decision you need to make there. So, all right, now let's actually get into the week. So Dan, you asked, you went 4-3. You went 3-4 last week. I went 4-3. Darren, I don't have my phone next to me. Darren told me what his record is in this contest, and he's doing quite well with it. I think he's basically tied with you. You are 34-22 on your picks. I'm 31-25 on my picks. So for the first game, Dan, as you can see it up on the screen, I'm going with Greg versus Eric, and it's interesting matchups right now in the league where there's no matchup this week where everybody's completely out of it. Greg obviously steals his second win last week. Greg, like I said, last week just fell rough for him. The week before, he still started Debo, but if I remember correctly, it wouldn't have affected his matchup. He may have won or lost. I'll be honest, my notes here is I'm actually picking Eric to win this game, mainly because he was first to the waiver wire. He was first to pick his team up. I'm hoping Greg is still invested and is going to fix his team, but I'm also worried that if you're waiting till Sunday to fix your team when you're fighting for a playoff spot, I don't think you're going to get the players that you need. So I think Eric's readiness to set his lineup and the fact that losing does nothing for you in this league and winning does, I think Eric's willingness to set his lineup and get everything in there is going to get him the win this week. So I'm picking Eric to win this matchup.
I think I'm taking Greg. I think he'll get his lineup set. I think he'll be ready to go. He has the better team, unless Eric's team just decides to just absolutely go off and score 40 more points than what he averages like he did last week. I don't really want to talk about this game that much. I'm more interested in talking about why you have 62 unread inbox messages.
Where do you even see that? Oh, over here. Every trade offer I get. Yeah, I say every trade offer I get, they go into those messages. And so I don't do anything with them. I don't even know how to make that go away unless I have to go click all 62 of them. So that's hilarious. I was like, where do I? So you're picking, you said Greg for this one.
Yeah, Greg will set his line. We'll be ready to go.
I'm not, like I said, I'm only mildly worried because of the Debo Samuel thing. And maybe the Debo Samuel, I know he was announced out the day before, but I mean, I don't know. Again, don't love it, but there's no benefit to winning or losing. I debated whether we should even take a point away from him, but the rules are the rules. So he did lose a point in the lottery system for not starting a full lineup. And Darren asked me about that this week. So the long and short of it is, if you don't set a full lineup, even by choice because of bye weeks, you will lose a point in the lottery system. But if you make the playoffs, you're not in the lottery. So it really doesn't matter much for you at that point. So next matchup, Dan, I had was Phil and Kenny, and I'm going to get them up on the screen there. So Kenny got a bad week out of Will Levis to start, and Phil doesn't even have a quarterback yet. He is still projected to win by about 13 points. So I'll let you get us started on this one.
I'm going to pick Phil just because someone has to win. I don't know what he's going to. I'm assuming he's going to wait and see if Watson plays, and if Watson plays, put him in there so we can get some negative points.
Yeah.
Phil has a better roster. Kenny's, just finishing out the year. Yep. He'll get the win.
I was asked by Kenny to stop disrespecting his team. So while all of my stats scream that this is going to be a blowout, I think Phil's going to win, but it won't be a blowout. Does that make you feel better, Kenny? That bad Will Levis week is going to hurt him because he probably, he didn't have a chance. The only other close position I had in my notes is the wide receiver one, because they both have very good wide receiver ones. So I will stop referencing Kenny as historic blowouts, but I will say that he is not going to win this matchup. And I'll just scroll here in case Lee wants to see the matchup, but nothing of major consequence there. Like I said, wide receiver one, they have Jamar Chase and Stephon Diggs battling it out, but I love Alvin Kamara again this week. And like I said, I think Phil runs away with this one. Next up, I have last year's rivalry, the Steves, battling it out. There can be only one. Steve Weiss gets 11 points on the Thursday night game out of his kicker, Nick Folk. Steve Horvath gets a big fat 0 out of the Tennessee Titans defense. I have Steve Weiss winning this matchup, and I put in my notes that this matchup, Dan, is the reason we have switched to a lottery. Steve is selling, has no reason to win. If it were last year, he would now be tanking to try to get to the bottom to have a chance at the first pick better. But now winning is what's going to help him get that first pick. And so I think this could be a close matchup. I think their flex matchup breaks the tie is what I have in my notes, because I feel like they cancel each other out at almost every single position. But I like Marquise Brown a lot better than I like Jonathan Mingo. And then, of course, getting that 0 from the Tennessee defense in a league where defenses score 15 to 20 relatively easily. I think that puts Horvath behind the 8 ball, and picking Steve Weiss to win this matchup.
I pick Steve.
You bastard. Who do you pick?
I'm picking Stevie as well. Okay. I think Horvath has a couple bad bye weeks this week that are going to hurt his receiver position. I don't love Josh Allen going against the Bengals. They've typically played him pretty well. Although Baker Mayfield going against Houston isn't much better. But I expect Devontae Adams to get closer to being Devontae Adams again.
Yeah, CeeDee Lamb could have a big week as well. There's a world where Horvath wins this.
Absolutely there is. I mean, I think overall Horvath has the better team. I just think Steve wins this week.
Yeah. And like I said, that's one of my.
I could see Marquise Brown getting a big fat 0. I mean, they're starting a rookie quarterback.
See, and that's where my theory is. I think he's going to see a ton of targets because he's going to latch onto his first read. So
I understand that that statistically that happens in games, but I just don't know how good this guy is.
That's fair.
It's not like this is a first or second round draft pick. It was a 5th round rookie getting thrown out there for whatever reason. I'm not sure why they're doing that. It makes 0 sense to me. You have Dobbs, who played for Cleveland. Oh wait, they traded him.
Traded him to Minnesota. Clayton Tune is literally all they have.
Well, isn't there a chance Murray plays?
No, they just announced it today.
Okay.
Yeah, he will not play tomorrow. So it is Clayton Tune. Phil in the chat, shocked that he got picked to win.
Hi, Phil. Hi, Jesse.
Yeah. Hey, again, Phil, second highest scoring team in the league. You're going to hear your name when we talk about current playoff teams here in a little bit. Next up.
But Willie?
He will. Next up, Taylor and Motts. Start off the day pretty even on the Monday night game, but the rosters are not pretty even when you look at the projected score. Taylor gets 12 points out of Najee Harris. Rob gets 11 points out of the Pittsburgh defense. Dan, you can lead us off on this one.
Bye week's killing Motts this week with his love for the Jaguars. I mean, Taylor has to be thorough. Najee Harris got double-digit points. I mean, that's already a win for him. That's probably more than Rob's running backs will score combined. So I expect Taylor to run away with this one. Nice 30, 40-point win. Be pretty happy on Sunday afternoon. Not worry about the rest of the weekend.
Yeah. We have this game completely read the exact same way. A blowout everywhere except for tight end, the David Njoku versus Dallas Goedert matchup. Otherwise, Taylor wins just every single position here. I found this as an interesting matchup because obviously both very close in record, but like Rob's team just, especially now with him being a big Jaguars owner, this is a terrible, terrible bye week for his team. So I think Rob is feeling very defeated after this week.
So you think that having Njoku could burn Taylor?
No. I think he'll be quite fine. I know what you were doing there. Dan, you got the undefeated Darren Miller this week. 8-0.
Real quick.
Taking on 4-4.
Let's talk long about this one.
Neither one of you had anybody going on the Thursday night game. Maybe Darren was asking about our matchup last week because
Darren averages 150 points a week. I average 100. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not looking great though. Though the matchup shows it way closer. Yeah, I'll get us started. Obviously, you don't want to talk much, but I have Darren. His running backs and Tyreek Hill are just far too much for you to overcome. You need Dallas to shut down Jalen Hurts for this to be close. But I do want to ask you, going kind of back to Lee's question, are you considering Higgins if Stafford is out of this game?
No. I trust people will get his. Either way, Higgins has been inconsistent this year. They've been throwing the ball more consistently to Chase more often. I'm not sure if the rib injury is still hurting Higgins, where he's at with that. I think Higgins could easily have a big game. The bigger question, if I put Higgins in, if it wasn't for the Saints playing the Bears, I would have taken Olave out and put Higgins in for Olave. But that Bears defense is Charmin toilet paper. So,
yeah. No, I think that's the only one that was super interesting to me. Clearly, you're picking Darren to win this game. Yeah, I don't think there was a
whole have a nice cozy Sunday as well.
Yeah. And then next up, I had the JR matchup. Terry versus JR, 4 wins versus 6 wins. Obviously, we both like JR's team a lot. Thursday night game made this very interesting. Terry gets 15 points out of Derrick Henry, another 7 from DeAndre Hopkins. JR gets 8 points from his IDP for TJ Watt. Solid game, but I think you probably want more. We just talked about the starting of Derek Carr this week. So for me, Dan, I promise you, I looked at this matchup for a good 15 minutes today. I don't know who I want to pick still to this moment. I have my pick. I think it's going to be a close matchup. I won't be surprised if this is a 1-point game. Almost every single position is a wash, with JR having an advantage at tight end, but I like Terry's defense a little bit better. JR gambling on the Raiders taking on that bad Giants team, whereas Terry has Dallas taking on the good Philly team, but Dallas has been a better fantasy defense. I think JR's guys have the better ceiling, so I am picking JR in this matchup. I will not be the least bit surprised if Terry wins it.
I think Terry has a better team, but I think JR gets the win. I just don't like the Chargers traveling to New York to play the Jets defense. That could be a tough matchup. Herbert's not been great. Whereas Carr going against Chicago, like Terry's advantage is quarterback, but the matchups make Carr the more favorable play.
Exactly.
So I'm going with JR as well.
Yeah, that cross-country matchup in the Jets worries me for the Chargers. Hopefully it could shake out where one of Terry's guys goes off and they don't both get shut down in what could possibly be an ugly game based on what we saw in Jets versus Giants last week. Very ugly game. Final matchup, I have 5 wins. Rob P has 3 wins, both fighting for playoff spots. Nobody quite solidified. Dan, I'll let you get us started on this one. I had a big Thursday night game, 17.5 points out of Deontay Johnson.
I mean, that helps. Anytime you get anything out of your receivers, it just really helps you. But the Chiefs, I think, are going to carry you to the win. I expect them to have huge games on a pretty big game against Miami. I just wrote down Chiefs are going to carry you. So that's what I expect.
I like Lamar Jackson a lot this week, so this one was way closer than I wanted it to be. Thankfully, I'm playing a team where I have a terrible bye week right now. Christian McCaffrey and David Montgomery both out, but I'm playing a team that's in running back trouble just like I am. He has very much better wide receivers than me. I need Travis Kelce to be Travis Kelce and Dalton Kincaid not to look how he looked last week. Otherwise, there are a lot of washes in this matchup, and I like his defense so much better than I like my defense. On my Wednesday show this week, Dan, I had the Chargers as my stream of the week. And the more I thought about it throughout the show, I actually changed it mid-show to the Atlanta Falcons and went and looked, and they weren't even available in our league. So I am not a fan of starting the Chargers this week. And then I noticed, did he fix it yet? Oh, he did. Okay, he just went and got Logan Wilson. I figured he was going to hold the Texans so that I would have no chance of playing the Texans this week. And that's exactly what he did. So it's like, I didn't know what to do there. And I noticed that he didn't have an IDP. And when this whole thing started, I am also picking myself to win. I need Lamar to not be great. And I need Patrick Mahomes to not score negative points again, but I am going to pick myself to win in a very, very close matchup. Dan, we agree on 6 of the 7 matchups yet again. The only one we disagree on is Greg versus Eric at the beginning of the show. Greg, set your lineup so that you don't make Dan look foolish. Dan, let's talk playoffs. So I'm going to bring the standings back up on the screen here. And let's talk about our 6 playoff teams. And I believe, looking at mine, I went super boring. And I have these 6 teams currently on top of the rankings as my 6 playoff teams. I still believe Darren is the champion. I think I still have Horvath in second place over JR. So yeah, I have Horvath in second, JR in third, myself in fourth, Phil in fifth, and Terry in sixth. So I think those 6 teams, I have moved you and my brother Taylor out of the playoffs. And I also have Rob P and Greg and still in a fighting category, but obviously they are behind the 8 ball. Those are my 6 playoff teams, Daniel.
Our top 4s are the same, but then I have Terry at 5 and I have Taylor at 6.
Okay.
Phil still has to play Darren, still has to play you, still has to play me, and he still has to play Rob again. I forget whose 5th matchup, but he has a gauntlet coming, and I just think that that's going to be the difference in him not making the playoffs. I have the same gauntlet. I have Darren this week. I got Taylor. I got you. I have Horvath still.
I will say, when you look at the playoff teams right now, Darren, no offense, Eric, Darren has an easy rivalry matchup, so his week 14 is looking good. JR has Kenny. Week 14 is looking good. Me and you have to battle it out. Horvath has
you can go ahead and say that you have the easy matchup. That's okay.
But I don't think it's the easy matchup. Horvath does. I was going to say Horvath has little Stevie, but he doesn't anymore. Horvath has Terry, so they have to battle. Okay, that takes away my whole premise. I was going to say there's not many tough matchups on week 14, but there are quite a few tough matchups in week 14 now. Now, when you look at it that way, so Phil said he doesn't want to hear about in the playoffs after he beats you next week, Dan. Phil, don't forget.
Even have myself in the playoffs now, Phil. Yeah. Pay attention.
And Dan and Phil, don't forget you called out guest spot next week, so I'll get a group text going with me, you, and Dan so that we can talk.
He won't follow through with it. He'll back out, not show up.
Well, ask if Jesse if she wants to come on, and we'll take care of that. So, Dan, you won. Dan, you won the game last week. 44 points. Me and you were the only 2 who played, and I think for the first time ever in the contest, I got negative points from Patrick Mahomes in the contest. So I got 22 from Kamara. I was pretty right on Kamara, but Mahomes knocked me down to 20 points. You got 44, 27 out of your quarterback. I don't remember who the pick was because I delete the pick when it comes to
Joe Burrow.
Joe Burrow. That's right. So yeah, you had a much better week than me. Do you want to go first or second, knowing that I stole your player last week by letting me go first?
That's fine. Ladies first.
Ladies first. All right. So for quarterback, I'm going to go Jalen Hurts. I think that Dallas Philadelphia game is going to be a very high scoring game. I told you. I think the Dallas game is going to be a very high scoring game. And I think you're going to see battles back and forth. I think Jalen Hurts shows up for big games. Didn't have the greatest game against Washington last week, though. Antonio Brown completely went off. He needs to control his turnovers. I think he bounces back this week. And Dan, I'm going to be a sucker and take my player for back-to-back weeks. Alvin Kamara is going to be my flex play yet again. I think he goes off against that Bears defense. We have seen Kamara score 6 touchdowns in a single game before. I don't think 3 or 4 is out of the question this week. And when I see that kind of ceiling, I cannot not take Alvin Kamara. So give me Jalen Hurts and Alvin Kamara as my top 2 plays.
I think Kamara will get you a solid 20. I don't think the Saints offense is powerful enough to get in the red zone in that many times.
That's fair.
Derek Carr is still. You're talking about the old Saints with Drew Brees.
That's fair. Well, the 6 touchdown game would have been not Drew Brees. I don't know.
Oh, it was Drew Brees.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay, you're probably right.
Yeah,
I'll have
because
to go look.
Kamara wasn't relevant the past couple years without Breeze.
Well, it was a Week 17 game. I'm going to go look it up while you announce your players here. It was the Week 17 game in 2020, I think. So I don't think that would have been Breeze. Would it have been?
I don't remember what year Breeze stepped down.
I'm going to look now.
That's fine.
So it is Drew Brees in 2020, if I'm right about it being the Week 17 game.
So I had originally had Hurts and AJ Brown, the teammates going against Dallas. I'm going to keep AJ Brown, even though you're taking Hurts away. I'm going to throw Burrow back in there for a second week.
Burrow and AJB.
I think he'll have a big game against Buffalo.
So that was not 2020.
Interesting. Okay. I mean, I'm wrong.
This is riveting entertainment for the people who are watching right now. Sorry, Lee.
Burrow did great. I just saw this great thing about comparing Burrow's offensive line last year to this year when they played the Bills, and how he destroyed the Bills with like guys that aren't even in the league right now. They have this year, so I expect them to have a big game again. I think Burrow's back.
Yeah, it certainly looks like he's back. Okay, that was Week 16 in 2020. That's why I'm getting it confused. I'm conflating 16 and 17 now with the new season. It was Week 16 in 2020, so it was a Drew Brees year. You are absolutely right. That's why I said he's only going to get half of that this time around. No, I agree with you. I think Joe Burrow's back. I think that San Francisco game was a statement game for Burrow and the Bengals, and this is going to be a very, very interesting matchup in their home against the Buffalo Bills. Obviously, a lot of emotions in that game. And we talked about this a little bit on our Wednesday show. I'm worried Buffalo could come out in that game flat and the Bengals come out hot and they could get smacked pretty easily.
The Bengals players are ready. They've been running their mouth this week because Buffalo, some of the Buffalo players came out after that playoff game last year and said the only reason the Bengals won is because it was in the snow. Jamar Chase, he's like, I've never even seen snow before. You're telling me we won because of snow? He always calls the Bills the Buffaloes, and it just cracks me up. So that's always for them as the Buffaloes.
I love it.
Yeah.
All right, guys, that's week 9. Hopefully we have Phil on next week. Like I said, I'll get that group text going in a little bit. Dan, any parting words for our friends?
I love you guys. It's been a good year. See you next year.
The defeated Dan. Rob P., I don't even know you, so it feels weird telling you to go fuck yourself, but I think it's going to be a terrible week for you, and I think everything in your life is going to go really, really bad from 1 o'clock to 7 o'clock from 9 o'clock in the morning until 7 o'clock on Sunday, because the Chiefs are going to come out very hot. I'm going to be winning this game after my quarterback and tight end go. You're already going to be upset at 1 o'clock, so drink a beer. Sorry about your life, buddy. Go Ninjas. Let's make it 4 in a row. Everybody have a good night.